Hello, everyone. Welcome to my mini lecture. In the previous lesson, we learned about pre-soldering information and developed a soldering work plan. Today, we will follow this plan to perform the soldering of the DC-regulated power supply circuit. Our goal for this lesson is to understand and identify components and become familiar with component soldering. The key and difficult point of this lesson is the soldering of components. Please start by checking the tools and materials prepared before this lesson. PCB, electric soldering iron, diagonal cutting plier, tweezer, soldering tin, rosin, and components. Then, prepare the components according to the component list. After testing, all the above components can be used normally. Next, we will begin soldering. During the process, please adhere to the code for safe use of electricity, maintain a safe distance to prevent burns, and follow anti-static and other safety operational guidelines. According to the principle of low before high, we will start with the soldering of the resistor. Step 1. Insert the resistor's pins into the corresponding holes on the PCB, bending them 90 degrees to fit the spacing. Step 2. Solder the pins. 1. Melt a small amount of soldering tin and rosin on the tip of the soldering iron. 2. Touch the tip of the soldering iron to the solder joint and then move the soldering tin wire over to begin melting the soldering tin. 3. After the soldering tin has saturated the entire solder joint, remove the soldering tin wire and then the soldering iron tip. Step 3. Cut off the excess component pins, leaving about 1.5 millimeters. Next, we solder the rectifier diode 1N4007. Insert the rectifier diode 1N4007 into the correct position on the PCB for soldering, ensuring the correct polarity. The white edge on the component should align with that of the component symbol on the PCB. The soldering method is similar to that for soldering the resistor. Solder the LED. Be aware of the polarity. LED pins are long positive and short negative. Solder the non-polarized capacitor. Insert the capacitor correctly according to its capacitance value before soldering. Solder the diode 1N5822. Insert the diode 1N5822 into the correct position on the PCB for soldering, ensuring the correct polarity. The white edge on the component should align with that of the component symbol on the PCB. Solder electrolytic capacitors C13 to C20. Insert the capacitors correctly according to their capacitance values, ensuring the correct polarity before soldering. Solder the self-locking switch. Determine the positions of the 6 pins of the self-locking switch before installation and soldering. Solder the terminal block. Insert the terminal block into the correct positions on the PCB, with the connection port facing the outer side of the PCB, then solder it in place. Solder electrolytic capacitors C2 and C3. Insert the capacitors correctly according to their capacitance values, ensuring the correct polarity before soldering. Solder the 3-terminal IC voltage regulator LM1085. First, attach the 3-terminal IC voltage regulator to the heatsink and ensure the correct positions of its 3 pins. Then, solder one pin first and check if the component is properly installed before continuing to solder the remaining 2 pins. Finally, install screws at the 4 corners of the circuit board. To complete the installation. After installation, check for any missed solder joints, cold solder joints, incorrectly soldered components, or short-circuiting of components due to solder bridging. Through this lesson, we have gained a certain understanding of the soldering methods for various components. 1. The sequence for soldering components on the circuit board is to start with the shorter components before the taller ones, and smaller components before larger ones, ensuring that the installation of previous components does not interfere with subsequent installations. 2. After inserting components, their markings should face in a direction that is easy to read, preferably in a left to right sequence. 3. Polarized components must be installed strictly according to the polarity requirements shown on the schematic diagram to avoid incorrect installation. 4. Through-hole components without heat dissipation requirements should be closely attached to the circuit board. Those with heat dissipation requirements should be suspended about 5 mm above the board. That's the end of this lesson. Thank you for watching.